It always takes exactly 3 seconds for your life to fall apart. I counted. 1. The conference room door slams open. 2. 12 heads snap toward our CEO's red face. 3. His finger jabs straight at me as he says those words I'll never forget. It's always the quiet ones. My cheeks burned as every colleague at that table turned to stare. 24 eyes piercing me like needles, faces transformed from friendly to suspicious in a heartbeat. That's when I knew. Being good at your job means nothing when someone powerful needs a scapegoat. I'm Margot Levine, 33, and before I go further with what happened that day at Helix Dynamics, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I still can't believe I'm sharing this story, but every time I tell it, I feel a little more of the weight lift off my chest. 4 years at the company, 4 years of arriving first and leaving last, 4 years of thank you, Margot, and what would we do without you, Margot? And in 3 seconds, I became the office pariah. Our CEO, Richard Blackwell, everyone called him Rick except me because I couldn't stomach the familiarity, stood at the head of the conference table that Thursday morning, veins throbbing at his temples. Behind him, a projection screen displayed a spreadsheet with a glaring red number, $2,367,412. Someone in this room is stealing from my company, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that powerful men use when they're about to destroy someone. We have a discrepancy of over $2 million, and I want answers. Now. The 12 of us sat frozen. There was Devin from marketing with his perpetually loosened tie, Amara from client relations who'd just returned from maternity leave, Terrence, our tech guy who rarely spoke but fixed everything, Lucia, our office manager who knew everyone's secrets, and the others, all of us part of the special projects division that handled our most sensitive client accounts. You should know that I was the financial compliance specialist, the one responsible for making sure every dollar was accounted for, every transaction above board. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Financial irregularities have been occurring for 8 months, Richard continued, pacing now. Clever, almost undetectable, but my external auditors found the pattern. My stomach twisted. 8 months ago was exactly when Richard had personally moved me to this team, saying he needed someone with your attention to detail. Now I understood why. He slammed a folder on the table. $2.3 million, siphoned through dozens of microtransactions, all approved within this room. His eyes locked on mine, by someone who thought they were smarter than me. I felt a drop of sweat slide down my spine as he approached my chair. Margot, here is our numbers person. Always quiet, always watching, always documenting. He practically spat the last word. It's always the quiet ones who think they won't get caught. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I had spent my life being the reliable one, the careful one, the one who triple-checked her work. Now here I was, being painted as a thief in front of the colleagues I'd broken my back to support. Sir, I finally managed, my voice embarrassingly small. There must be some mistake. His laugh was cold. Oh, I don't make mistakes, Ms. Levine. But apparently you do. I've already contacted the authorities. They'll be here within the hour. The room spun. Police? This couldn't be happening. Check her computer, someone whispered. Dominic, our team lead who'd always seemed to resent my close work with Richard. Already done, Richard said. Found plenty. That's when I realized they'd planned this. This wasn't a discovery. It was an execution. You know that moment when fear transforms into something else? When your body fills with this strange calm because you've hit rock bottom and suddenly you can see everything clearly? That's where I was. My hand stopped shaking as I reached for my phone. Sir, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. You might want to see this. Richard sneered. A confession? How thoughtful. Not exactly. I pulled up the secure folder I'd been maintaining for 10 months, since before I'd even joined this team. I handed him my phone, screen open to a video. His face changed as he watched, confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like fear. You see, 10 months ago, I'd noticed something odd in our company's transaction logs. Small discrepancies. Nothing major, but patterns that didn't make sense. I'd taken my concerns to my previous supervisor, who'd brushed me off. So I'd started documenting everything. Screenshots, recordings of meetings, backups of altered files before and after they were changed. Not because I suspected fraud, but because I was tired of having my concerns dismissed. When Richard moved me to the special projects team, I'd continued my documentation out of habit. Detailed, meticulous records of everything I touched, including the 6 separate occasions when Richard himself had asked me to adjust certain client billing records. Each time he'd explained it away, fixing an accounting error, balancing the books, client relations issues. Each time, I'd done as instructed while quietly backing up the original data. I hadn't realized what I was documenting until 3 weeks ago, when the pattern finally became clear. By then, I had 10 months of evidence showing exactly how 2.3 million had disappeared, and exactly whose instructions had made it happen. "You recorded our private meetings?" Richard whispered, his face ashen. "One-party consent state," I replied. "And I have much more than recordings." The room had gone deadly silent, everyone watching this power shift, this impossible moment. "These are confidential business matters," he said, voice rising. "You've violated company policy." "Interesting, that's your concern right now," I said, finding courage I never knew I had. "Not the fraudulent transactions or the fact that you were about to have me arrested for your crimes." He straightened his tie, switching tactics. "Everyone out, except Margot." No one moved. "Now!" he shouted. Dominic stood first. "I think we should stay." His eyes met mine with something new. Respect, maybe, or just the basic human decency that comes from witnessing someone nearly destroyed. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced down and blanched. "This meeting is over. We'll discuss this privately, Margot." "No," I said, surprising even myself. "We won't." For years, I'd been the office doormat, the reliable one who stayed late, fixed others' mistakes, and never complained. The one whose weekend plans could always be sacrificed for an emergency. The quiet one. "Everything in that folder has already been backed up to 3 secure locations," I continued, "including my lawyer's office. You have 20 minutes until the actual authorities arrive, the ones I called this morning." Richard's face twisted with rage. "You stupid bye." "Don't," Lucia interrupted sharply. "She has enough to bury you already." The next 20 minutes were a blur. Richard barricaded himself in his office. Security arrived. People whispered in corners. I sat alone at the conference table, shaking so hard I had to grip the armrests. I'd done everything by the book my entire life. Never jaywalked. Filed my taxes early. Kept receipts for office supplies. And somehow, I'd ended up here, having to choose between going to prison for someone else's crimes or fighting back against the most powerful person I knew. When the FBI agents walked in, yes, actual FBI, turns out Richard's creative accounting crossed state lines, I handed them my phone and 10 months of meticulously organized evidence. "You've been documenting this for how long?" asked the female agent, scrolling through my files with raised eyebrows. "Since I first noticed something wrong," I said. Nobody would listen. She looked at me with something like pity. "They're listening now." As they led Richard out, no handcuffs, just a humiliating escort through the office he'd ruled like a kingdom, he locked eyes with me one last time. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, only for me to hear. "Nobody will hire a whistleblower." Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd just torched my career to save myself. But watching him walk out, I realized I'd spent my entire professional life being afraid, of disappointing people, of not being perfect, of raising concerns, of standing out. I was tired of being afraid. The company imploded over the next few weeks. Auditors swarmed our offices. The board of directors held emergency meetings. A few executives resigned suddenly for personal reasons. The special projects team was disbanded. All of us placed on paid leave while they sorted through the mess. 3 weeks after that meeting, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by job listings I was too paralyzed to apply for. Richard's words echoed in my head. Nobody will hire a whistleblower. I'd saved myself from prison, but at what cost? My phone rang, Amara from the team. Have you heard? She asked without preamble. Heard what? The board fired 4 more executives this morning. They're claiming they knew nothing about Richard's scheme. But guess what the investigators found? Emails. Lots of emails. I closed my eyes. So everyone knew. Not everyone, she said, but enough people to make this a much bigger scandal than just Richard. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. There's something else. Amara continued. The board is looking for internal candidates to help rebuild. People they can trust. A pause. They asked specifically about you, Margot. My laugh was hollow. Me? The whistleblower? The person with integrity, she corrected. The one who did the right thing at enormous personal risk. I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd been invisible, valuable for my work, but never seen as leadership material. Too quiet, too careful, too me. They want to meet tomorrow, Amara said. Just think about it. After we hung up, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. This wasn't the vindication I'd imagined. It wasn't a clean victory or a perfect revenge. It was messy and complicated and terrifying. But maybe that's how real justice works. Not as a lightning bolt, but as a slow rebuilding from the ruins. The next morning, I put on my most professional outfit, the one I reserved for the most important meetings. As I walked into the corporate headquarters, past security guards who nodded at me with new respect, past employees who whispered as I passed, I realized something profound. Richard had been right about one thing. It is always the quiet ones. Because we're watching, we're noticing, we're documenting. And when pushed too far, we finally speak. The boardroom looked different from the other side of the table. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of 7 people who'd never given me a second glance before. Now they watched me with careful attention as I settled into the chair directly opposite Diane Mercer, the board chairwoman. Ms. Levine, she began, her voice crisp and businesslike. I want to start by thanking you for your courage. What you did protected this company from far worse consequences. The words sounded rehearsed, like something her crisis management team had crafted. I nodded politely but said nothing. I'd learned that silence makes powerful people uncomfortable. Let them fill it. We've conducted a thorough investigation, continued Lawrence Chen, the company's lead counsel. The fraud goes back 18 months and involves 7 executives, including Richard. 4 have already resigned. 3 are contesting their termination. My mouth went dry. 7 executives knew? Knew, participated, or deliberately looked the other way, Lawrence clarified. The $2.3 million Richard accused your team of stealing was just what we've found so far. I thought about my former teammates, 11 people who'd been under suspicion, whose reputations had been questioned. What happens to my team? Diane exchanged glances with the others. That's partly why we wanted to speak with you. We're restructuring the company. Several departments will be consolidated, and we need people we can trust to help us rebuild. Here it came. The job offer Amara had mentioned. I braced myself. We'd like you to lead the new financial compliance division, Diane said. You'd report directly to the board, with a substantial salary increase and the authority to build your own team. My heart raced. This was beyond anything I'd expected. A director-level position, multiple steps above my previous role. The kind of job that would normally require an MBA and 15 years of experience. The kind of job no one would have ever considered me for a month ago. Why me? I asked. Not fishing for compliments, but genuinely needing to understand. Diane's professionally pleasant expression faltered. Frankly, Ms. Levine, we have a credibility problem. We need someone with unimpeachable integrity. Someone who's proven they'll do the right thing even when it's difficult. Translation, they needed my reputation to save theirs, my whistleblowing as a corporate shield. I'd be their ethics mascot, evidence that the company had cleaned house. And if I say no? I asked. We'd understand completely, Lawrence said smoothly. You'd receive a generous severance package, excellent references. And an NDA, I assume? I interrupted. The momentary silence confirmed it. They'd pay me to go away quietly if that's what I wanted. I looked around the table at these powerful people who suddenly needed something from me. A month ago, I would have taken whatever they offered, grateful for any positive recognition. But that Margot died the day Richard tried to destroy her. I'd like to propose an alternative, I said, surprised by my own steady voice. I'll consider the position, but I have conditions. The air in the room shifted, eyebrows raised. This wasn't in their script. We're open to discussion, Diane said cautiously. First, my entire team gets cleared publicly. A company-wide email stating they've been exonerated, plus bonuses for the stress they've endured. Lawrence scribbled notes. That seems reasonable. Second, I want to interview everyone in the finance department personally. Anyone who stays will report to me, and I need to trust them. More nods around the table. Third, I want Richard's office. That stopped them. Richard's corner office was traditionally reserved for C-suite executives. That's not standard for a director-level position, said Martin from HR, speaking for the first time. I met his gaze steadily. Nothing about this situation is standard. Diane studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Anything else? I took a deep breath. Yes. No NDA. I won't publicly disparage the company if you act in good faith, but I won't sign away my right to speak. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. That's highly unusual, Lawrence began. So is being falsely accused of embezzlement by your CEO? I countered. I didn't ask for any of this. But now that we're here, I need to know I'm walking into something better, not just different. Diane dismissed everyone except herself and Lawrence. For 45 minutes, we negotiated terms. By the time I left that boardroom, I had everything I'd asked for in writing, and something even more valuable: respect. The next day, when I walked into Richard's former office, and the office now, I felt a complex wave of emotions. Triumph, yes, but also sadness for what it had cost to get here. I ran my fingers along the expensive desk where he'd once sat plotting my downfall, and thought about power, how it changes people, how it can corrupt, how desperately I didn't want that to happen to me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Lucia stood there, holding a small plant. Office warming gift, she said, placing it on my desk. Hard to kill, even for people who forget to water it. Like your career, apparently. I laughed, my first genuine laugh in weeks. Have you heard from the others? I asked. Everyone's been called in for meetings today. There are rumors about reorganization, about you. She trailed off, studying my face. So it's true? You're running things now? A department, not the company, I clarified. And I'd like you to be my second in command. Her eyes widened. Me? I'm office management, not finance. You're organized, perceptive, and most importantly, you stood up for me that day when it would have been easier not to. I said, I need people I can trust. Over the next week, I met with each member of our former team, plus dozens of others from finance and accounting. I hired Terrence to build custom security protocols for our new department, brought in Amara to handle external communications. Even Dominic, who'd initially suggested checking my computer, showed enough remorse and competence to earn a place on the new team. Only Devin declined my offer. I'm sorry, Margot, but this place is tainted for me now, he said. I've accepted a position elsewhere. I respected his decision. Not everyone wants to rebuild from ruins. The work was harder than anything I'd done before. 16-hour days became normal. We found more financial irregularities as we dug deeper. Richard's scheme had tentacles throughout the company. Each discovery felt like vindication, but also reminded me how close I'd come to taking the fall for it all. 3 months into my new role, I received a text from an unknown number. You think you've won? Enjoy it while it lasts. I knew immediately who it was from. My hands shook as I showed the message to Lawrence. We'll handle this, he assured me. Richard's under investigation by 3 different agencies. This will only make things worse for him. But that night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't shake my fear. Richard had been powerful and connected. What if he still had allies in the company? What if this was just the beginning of his retaliation? I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The next morning, I arrived at work with dark circles under my eyes, flinching when my phone buzzed with a new message. It wasn't Richard this time, but a news alert. Former Helix Dynamics CEO Richard Blackwell arrested on multiple fraud charges. The article included his mugshot, unshaven, hollow-eyed, nothing like the intimidating figure who'd once pointed his finger at me in accusation. The FBI had found evidence of similar schemes at his two previous companies. This wasn't his first fraud, just the first time he'd been caught. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Diane in the elevator. "I assume you've seen the news," she said. I nodded. "The prosecutors called. They want you to testify." My stomach clenched. The thought of facing Richard in court, of having to relive that humiliating meeting, made me physically ill. "Do I have a choice?" I asked. "Legally? Yes. Practically." She left the sentence unfinished. We both knew the reality. If I refused to testify, it would undermine everything I'd fought for. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early December. I spent the night before rehearsing my testimony with Lawrence, preparing for every possible question. "Just tell the truth," he advised. "That's all you need to do." But walking into that courtroom the next day felt like walking into battle. My carefully chosen outfit, a charcoal gray suit, nothing flashy, felt like armor, my organized folder of notes, a shield. And then Richard was there, sitting beside his attorney, wearing a suit that hung loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight. When he turned and saw me, his expression shifted from blank to venomous so quickly it made me flinch. I expected to feel afraid. Instead, I felt nothing. This man had no power over me anymore. When I took the stand, my voice didn't shake. I answered each question clearly, referring to my documentation when needed. I described the transactions, the pattern of fraud, how Richard had positioned me to take the blame. Richard's attorney tried to paint me as an ambitious employee who'd turned on her boss to advance her career. "Isn't it convenient that you're now in a director-level position after accusing Mr. Blackwell?" "There was nothing convenient about any of this," I replied. "I lost friends. I still have anxiety attacks. I check my locks 3 times before bed." But I didn't have a choice. It was either speak up or go to prison for something I didn't do. When it was over, I walked past Richard without making eye contact. Outside, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. "Miss Levine, how does it feel to take down your former boss? Will you continue working at Helix Dynamics? Do you consider yourself a hero?" I pushed through them without answering. This wasn't about heroism or revenge. It was about survival. 6 months after that first accusation, Richard pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. The details were made public. He'd been siphoning money to cover personal gambling debts, creating elaborate cover-ups, and preparing to flee the country when the scheme began to unravel. He received 8 years in federal prison. The company survived, though changed. We lost clients initially, but gained new ones who appreciated our enhanced transparency measures. The Levine protocols, as they became known internally, set a new standard for financial compliance. My team, my real team, the people who'd been through hell with me, became the most cohesive unit in the company. We were the ones who'd seen the worst and chosen to rebuild anyway. That creates a bond nothing can break. A year to the day after Richard had stormed into that conference room pointing his finger at me, I called my team together. "I want to thank you," I said, looking around at these people who'd become more than colleagues. A year ago, we were nearly destroyed by someone who thought power meant never being questioned. You could have left, found safer jobs. Instead, you stayed to fix what was broken. "We stayed because of you," Lucia said. "You showed us what real leadership looks like." That night, I sat alone in my office, no longer thinking of it as Richard's, and reflected on how completely my life had changed. I'd never wanted power or attention. I just wanted to do my job well and be treated with basic respect. Instead, I'd been thrust into a crucible that burned away my fear of confrontation, my need for approval, my habit of making myself small. What emerged wasn't perfect or fearless, but stronger, more authentic. Richard had been right about one thing. It is always the quiet ones you need to watch. Not because we're plotting against you, but because we see everything. We notice patterns, we keep receipts. And when pushed too far, we don't just speak up, we transform. 2 years later, I was promoted to CFO. The day the announcement went public, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about my promotion and a single line written in familiar handwriting. Congratulations, you won. I didn't respond. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. Sometimes, living well really is the best revenge. Is my story unique? Maybe not. Corporate fraud happens every day. Whistleblowers face retaliation. Power corrupts. Systems protect themselves. What's unique is that I survived to tell it, that I found my voice when it mattered most, that I learned the difference between being quiet and being silenced. So if you're watching this and something in my story resonates, if you're the quiet one, the careful one, the one who notices things others miss, know this. Your attention to detail isn't overthinking. Your caution isn't weakness. Your documentation isn't paranoia. It might just save you someday. And if you're the Richard in someone's story, the one using your power to crush those beneath you, believing your position makes you untouchable, know this too. The quiet ones are watching, always watching. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up to someone more powerful than you? What gave you the courage to speak up? Or if you stayed silent, what held you back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe. There's power in our shared experiences, in knowing we're not alone in these moments that test who we really are. Because ultimately, that's what my story is about. Not fraud or corporate politics or even revenge. It's about that moment when you have to decide who you are, when everything is on the line. When the comfortable mask of who you've been is ripped away, and you discover who you've always been beneath it. Sometimes it takes nearly being destroyed to find out how powerful you really are.